Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hello.
Today, we're digging into a really unique experiment in higher education, the Integrated Science, Business, and Technology program at Salle University, ISBT.
Right. We're looking at this deep research analysis you shared, tracing the program's journey, from its start right up to, well, where it is now.
Yeah, and our mission here is to unpack the core ideas, understand how it was meant to, break the mold, what made it different.
And maybe what lessons its story holds for prepping students for, let's face it, a pretty complex world.
Exactly. Think of it as getting the inside track on how one university really tried to tear down those old academic silos.
Build something new from the ground up.
Right.
Okay, let's get into it.
So to really get the ISBT program, we kind of need to step back first. Before it even started, back around 99, there was this growing noise, this push for reform in American higher ed.
That's right. Your source points to a key document, actually a 1989 report from the Virginia Commission on the University of the 21st Century, The Case for Change.
Even though it was focused on Virginia, it sort of captured this wider anxiety, didn't it?
And it really did. A national feeling that maybe the old ways weren't quite cutting it anymore for the future.
And a big part of that was aimed at what the report called the tyranny of the disciplines. That's a pretty strong phrase.
It is. And it gets right at the problem, These rigid walls between departments, physics over here, business way over there. The report argued it stifled real inquiry.
Made it hard to tackle problems that don't fit neatly in one box.
Exactly. And hard to do genuinely interdisciplinary work, both teaching and research.
Right. And besides that critique, the report also hammered home the need for students to get really competent in math, science, tech.
But crucially, not just the technical bits, it stressed understanding the societal implications of technology, the why and the so what, not just the how.
So know how to use it, but also understand its place, its impact.
Precisely. And that whole environment, that whole conversation happening nationally, pushing for integration, for applied learning, breaking down silos, that was the context ISBT was born into. It was a direct answer to those calls in the late 90s.
Okay, so LaSalle steps in with this, pretty bold move. The ISBT program wasn't just tweaking things, was it? It was a whole new approach.
Absolutely. A really holistic answer to that call for integrated learning. The formal proposal landed in 1999. Folks like Richard DiDio, Dr. Nancy Jones were championing it.
And a key thing you mentioned, they decided to create entirely new courses just for this major.
Yeah, that's huge. It signals they were serious about real integration, not just, grabbing existing classes from different departments and sticking them together.
They were building it from the ground up to be blended from the start.
Exactly. And it was designed right from the beginning as a boundary-spanning thing.
Yeah.
It needed collaboration between arts and sciences and the business school. Couldn't exist otherwise.
Okay, but what was the philosophical engine driving it? It wasn't just about mixing science, business, and tech, right? There was something deeper.
There was. Fundamentally, the program was rooted in general systems theory.
Okay, general systems theory. For listeners maybe not familiar, how can we kind of break that down in this context?
Well, at its core, it's a way of seeing the world not as isolated bits and pieces, but as interconnected systems. It focuses on relationships, feedback loops, how things influence each other.
Like an ecosystem or a company.
Exactly. Or a supply chain. You can't understand one part without seeing how it connects to everything else. The whole is more than the sum of its parts,
Got it. So the program wanted students to see those connections everywhere. How did that theory, that kind of abstract idea, actually show up in the classes?
Well, the curriculum explicitly used concepts from systems thinking. Things like input, process, output models. You see that everywhere, right? Building a product, running a project, even biological processes. Or looking at how energy, information, and material flow and interact within different systems.
That's really interesting. So applying this big picture framework directly to the science and business stuff they were learning.
Yeah. And your source also mentions they deliberately integrated the ethical side, too.
Leveraging LaSalle's strengths there.
Absolutely. Making sure students connected the ethical and moral questions to the scientific and business problems because, you can't really understand a system fully without considering its human impact.
So the goal wasn't just technically skilled grads, but people who could work in teams, manage complexity, and apply all this integrated knowledge, ethically.
That was the aim.
And the curriculum was where this philosophy really hit the ground.
Definitely. In the beginning, those first few years, like 99 to 2002, all the ISBT majors basically shared the same foundation. They did the core sciences, math, computer science.
But it wasn't siloed, right?
No, it was intentionally interwoven with things like project management, collaboration, right from the start.
And again, all new courses designed specifically for ISBT.
Every single major course, yeah. Faculty like Dr. William L. Weaver were developing really innovative stuff that spanned these integrated topics.
And the teaching style leaned heavily on hands-on active learning.
Definitely. Less sitting and listening, more doing.
Makes sense.
Now, as the program grew, the specializations, the concentrations, they evolved. What started as maybe 3 proposed strategic sectors, by 2005 they firmed up into distinct concentrations. Energy and natural resources, ENR, informational and knowledge management, IKM, and biotechnology, BIO.
They even changed the logo then, didn't they, to reflect those paths?
They did around 2005, but then came another really significant shift in 2010, the ISBT 2.0 upgrade.
Right, ISBT 2.0, what was the big change there?
That's when they integrated the IKM concentration, information, and knowledge management into the core curriculum for every ISBT major.
So instead of IKM being a separate choice, everyone got that deep dive into information management.
Exactly. The faculty realized those skills were just becoming essential everywhere across all fields. They noticed students were actually double majoring or concentrating in IKM alongside ENR or bio anyway.
It validated the need.
It really did. And that deeper immigration, that move, was symbolized by adopting the Triquetra logo in 2010.
The 3 interlocked loops.
Yeah, representing that deep, sort of indivisible unity of science, business, and technology. Moving away from a logo that showed them as just touching sections. The colors even changed then, linking back to philosophy and science, reinforcing that connection to general systems theory.
It really shows a program adapting learning from experience.
So beyond that core curriculum structure, what else really made ISBT stand out?
Well, you mentioned the deep interdisciplinary integration, science, business, tech, plus LaSalle's liberal arts and ethics focus. That was the foundation.
But how they did it mattered.
And the huge emphasis on project management and teamwork really jumps out. That's what you always hear employers asking for.
Constantly. Yeah, students were thrown into complex projects designed to build exactly those skills. And tied right into that was this relentless focus on hands-on learning, tackling, actual real-world problems.
The source mentions specific facilities,
Yeah.
right? State-of-the-art labs and innovation factory.
Yes. That innovation factory, that was a deliberate thing. Giving students access to 3D printers, maker tools, a space to actually build things, prototype solutions based on what they were learning.
Very cool.
And research opportunities were baked in too, a really big part of it.
The CPhages program sounds particularly unique. What exactly was that?
Okay, so CPhages, it's this national research program sponsored by Howard Hughes Medical Institute. It's about authentic discovery. ISBT students for 2 whole semesters had to do this.
Mandatory research.
Mandatory. They collect soil samples, isolate bacteria-killing viruses, bacteriophages, characterize them.
So not just following a lab manual, they were actually discovering new things.
Yeah. That's the whole point. Genuine scientific discovery. And it often led to students getting their names on actual peer-reviewed papers. It's a fantastic way to integrate real research into undergrad.
Wow. And their final capstone projects also seem to connect academics with the professional world.
Very much so. Often developed with input from the program's advisory board, maybe corporate sponsors. So the projects tackled relevant challenges, and students got experience working with people outside the university.
Right. And you mentioned the ethics piece wasn't just tacked on.
No, consciously woven in. Analyzing the ethical dimensions within the scientific and business problems fitting with LaSalle's overall mission.
And practically speaking, that STEM designation from Homeland Security, that's a big deal, especially for international students.
Deal, yeah. It makes them eligible for that OPT extension optional practical training. Means they can get significantly more work experience in the U.S. after graduating. It reflects the program's technical rigor.
And like you said, you can almost see the program's story just by looking at how its logo changed from separate pieces to that integrated triquetra.
The program definitely had ambitious growth targets from the start, aiming for a pretty decent number of students eventually.
The source notes its admin home was a bit, well, fluid. Department, cluster, under arts and sciences. Does that maybe hint at the challenge of fitting something so unique into the usual university boxes?
I think it probably does, yeah. These kinds of pioneering interdisciplinary programs often struggle to find the perfect administrative fit, but whatever the label, the focus was clearly on the student experience.
And experiential learning was a massive part of that.
Oh, absolutely. Internships, co-ops, strongly pushed, often for credit. You see names like AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Keystone Foods popping up. Getting that real-world exposure was central.
And the research element wasn't just see phages, right?
Yeah.
It continued.
It did. Beyond the mandatory part, you had capstone research, opportunities for one-on-one work with faculty, sometimes even collaborating with students from other science departments. It was a consistent thread.
And the learning environment itself sounds like it encouraged engagement in small classes.
Yeah, around 22 students typically,
Mm.
plus access to those specialized facilities, the innovation factory, the labs. They even supported study abroad for that global perspective.
So the goal was really to produce grads who are uniquely ready for all sorts of careers.
And you see that variety in the alumni examples. You mentioned Brandon Washington, 10 grad, founding a nonprofit, the STREAM engine, and now teaching back in the program.
Drawing on that integrated background.
Exactly. And then Madama, a recent 23 grad, going into finance, doing further studies at UPenn.
That range really does speak to the versatility, doesn't it? Combining the knowledge, the practical skills, the real-world stuff, and that ethics and liberal arts foundation.
Trying to prepare them not just for a job, but for, purposeful lives, fits right in with LaSalle's mission.
Which, unfortunately, brings us to right now. Late 2024. The ISBT program is at a pretty critical point.
It is. LaSalle announced recently, effective October 8th, 2024, they've paused admitting new students into the ISBT major.
Though importantly, they have said publicly that students already in the program will be able to finish their degrees on time.
Yes, that continuity is vital for the current students. But your source does note that the specific, detailed reasons why they're pausing admissions haven't really been made public.
Which naturally leads to questions and reflection, especially for a program with a 25-year history.
It does. A decision like this could stem from a lot of things. Maybe broader institutional changes, maybe shifts in student demand, maybe the resource challenges of running such a specialized interdisciplinary program.
Or potentially a strategic pause to review and maybe even reimagine it for the future.
That's also possible. Without the official word, we're kind of left to consider the possibilities, but it's undeniably a significant moment for the program.
So when we look back at this whole journey, what does the ISBT program at LaSalle really represent?
I think it stands as a really substantial long-term attempt at true interdisciplinary higher education, a concrete effort to tackle that tyranny of the disciplines we talked about, to build something genuinely integrated.
And its legacy continues, right, through
Yeah.
the alumni out there using that unique mix of skills, science, business, tech, often with that systems thinking approach.
Absolutely, in all sorts of fields. And it also leaves behind some really important pedagogical lessons for other universities.
Like what?
Well, the value of deep interdisciplinary work, the effectiveness of hands-on, project-based learning, the absolute need to weave ethics into technical and business education, and just how crucial real-world experience is.
Principles that seem more relevant than ever today, really, as universities keep trying to figure out how best to prepare students for this increasingly complex, interconnected world.
For sure. Though the pause in admissions does sort of underscore the real challenges involved in sustaining these kinds of pioneering specialized programs. They can be resource-intensive, administratively complex.
Right. It's not always easy within the broader university landscape.
Which kind of raises a final thought, doesn't it? Looking at the whole life cycle of ISBT, its philosophical origins, its innovative design, how it evolved, and now this pause. What does it tell us about the future of interdisciplinary education itself?
Yeah. How do you not just start something this ambitious, but how do you keep it going, adapt it, and sustain it over the long haul, especially when the world keeps changing?
Exactly. Something for all of us in higher ed, and maybe for you listening, to think about.